What's going on, people? Welcome back to the United Stand. Look, as you all know, Manchester United have sacked Ruben Amorim. Now, don't worry, we have a very, very special guest. The guy who knows everything, Ben Jacobs, is live, and he's going to give us a complete breakdown of everything that's been going on this morning with Ruben Amorim and all the talk about the next manager, the interim manager, particular players. Ben Jacobs is going to break down everything. So, Ben, how are you doing? What's it been like this morning for you?
Well, I think your jumper sums it up. Did you wear that after Ruben Amorim was sacked, or did you just fortuitously have it on? Because drama is the key word.
Yeah, honestly, drama. It's been absolute drama all morning. I mean, for you, what was the... I kind of want to go back. Now, last night, there was obviously loads of talk about Ruben Amorim's press conference after the game, and obviously the comments that he made. What was the process from that moment up until the point he got sacked? What was going on? What were the conversations that were happening?
Yeah, I think at the point Ruben Amorim was speaking, and we now know this in hindsight, he realised it was the beginning of the end. And as we revealed on TalkSport yesterday, there were tensions specifically between Amorim and Jason Wilcox. And those tensions have been bubbling over the festive period, and even actually starting in mid-November with Ruben Amorim wanting, as he said in his press conference, very honestly, to be more manager than head coach, but that's not his job title. And Manchester United's perspective under Ineos, at least, is that no head coach will get a veto like Erik ten Hag had. So Ruben Amorim was trying to force a recruitment agenda that wasn't aligned with the bigger picture. And I think one aspect was revealed in the summer when Ruben Amorim said he wanted Ollie Watkins and Benjamin Sesko was signed. It's not to say, by the way, that debate isn't useful and healthy, because you don't want everybody just to be a yes man or woman. But Ruben Amorim was pushing for Premier League experience everywhere and something a bit more short term. And of course, Jason Wilcox and Christopher Vivell were working out what was the best value for money. And that kind of bubbled and then was parked. And then we got to the November period, and Ruben Amorim realised the club were going to make a play for Antoine Semenyo in late November. When that didn't come off in late December, his perspective is that 65 million should have been repurposed to a midfielder and or a left wing back, whereas Manchester United's hierarchy insists January was and will be quiet unless they find a summer target. So it's not about ring fencing money for January. It's about moving summer budget forward. So you try for Semenyo because he ticks every box: long-term, right position, box office, Premier League quality. If you don't get him, you don't then go and suddenly sign anybody just for the sake of it. You wait if the right target doesn't present itself. And I think Amorim started to understand that the waiting might be to find fits for a new manager, a new system, the waiting with Kobbie Mainoo, in part down to a feeling that player might outlast manager. So tensions have been building for quite some time. And I also come back to what I said before, which is that Ruben Amorim, despite Sir Jim Ratcliffe's comments of 3 years being the time frame in which he was judged, was always, as a starting point, only going to get 38 games spread across 2 seasons in the Premier League. And after those 38 games were hit, which was probably November or even early December, there was enough data to judge him on results. So then if we remove the tension, if we remove the relationship with Jason Wilcox, and if we remove the festive period, 38 games from a data point of view is when Amorim could, in the Manchester United's hierarchy's perspective, be judged. And that point passed. And then, as we've said on many shows, it was about, can Ruben Amorim get through the festive and New Year period? And was he to get to mid-January in the Manchester derby with results on track? He would have got until the summer, but he didn't make it that far. And as he realised after Wolves, in the build-up to Leeds and in the media aftermath, that things were not trending towards a long-term future, he spoke out more and more, from a cryptic message to a more overt attack on the hierarchy. And that was always going to be the beginning of the end.
So, I mean, let me just get that right. So you're saying even though the owners and the directors, they said Amorim is going to get 3 years, really it was actually 38 games that the owners were going to give him before they truly judged him?
Yeah, I mean, that's my understanding. Obviously, Jim Ratcliffe came out and said 3 years. So a lot of people would take that at face value, but you're never going to get 3 years as a manager at any big club if results don't go according to plan. So 3 years was a comment made for optics to support Ruben Amorim at a point where he was actually also under pressure because he went into that game against Sunderland before the October break with the potential, had they lost that game, that he might have been out of a job then. So my information, despite Sir Jim Ratcliffe's public comments, has always been, and we've said it on countless shows, two things. One, after 38 collective Premier League games, they start to look at the data and judge Ruben Amorim on performances. Two, if he got through the festive and New Year period, he would get until the summer, but he didn't. And then when you add tensions over recruitment and a feeling from the Manchester United side that Amorim was not that tactically flexible, those added elements only escalated the speed at which eventually Ruben Amorim was sacked.
Was there any conversations before the Leeds game? Because I've heard loads of talks and loads of rumours around that there was meetings going on during the week about Ruben Amorim potentially being sacked. Was there any concrete conversations that happened before this game? And would that have would the game have impacted whether or not it would have happened?
Yeah, I think after Wolves, there was a meeting between Wilcox and Amorim, and we've got two perspectives here because those close to Wilcox say he went into that meeting to clear the air and to speak about lowering expectations for the January window in the aftermath of Antoine Semenyo, but actually raising the bar of the targets they were looking for in the summer. So to effectively explain to the manager, don't expect too much in January unless we get a big change, but do expect a lot of support and budget in the summer. And there was a lot of alignment on some of the targets like Carlos Baleba and Elliot Anderson that Amorim also wanted. And don't forget too that Manchester United argue that Amorim was fully behind Cunha and Mbumo, which is true to my understanding. And United also had Chesko. But as I've said before, I think that Amorim would have preferred Ollie Watkins, but it's not to say that he was against Benjamin Chesko, and that debate is kind of healthy. So Wilcox thought the meeting was about getting everybody on track, getting through the January window and trying to consolidate Manchester United's position, which ironically is not that bad. So we're not talking about a sacking with the season being a write-off. We're talking about a managerial departure where Manchester United is still firmly in the race for Champions League football. And I think Wilcox was trying to get out of Amorim in that meeting more tactical flexibility and lowering those expectations that anything too sensational was going to happen in the January market. Amorim's response was quite furious, and I think that set in motion a domino effect that eventually led to his sacking. And Amorim's perspective is essentially, how can I be tactically flexible when the squad is threadbare in certain areas? And how can I be tactically flexible without an elite level new midfield signing and a wing back? And I think Manchester United counter, they spent 250 million on supporting Amorim. His top priority was two number 10s. They both arrived. If it had been a midfielder instead of one number 10, maybe we'd be speaking about how they needed another number 10 or another source of goals. So it's easy to kind of look at it now and say there's a glaring midfield hole. And that has been Amorim's perspective for quite some time. And he was forthright, to my knowledge, with Wilcox, and a professional meeting turned quite confrontational. But again, Manchester United sources have always said really quite clearly for some time, we know where we need to strengthen, but we can't do it in one or two windows. Firstly, because some of the targets are not available, like many of the midfielders, and secondly, because of PSR. And I think the feeling within the Manchester United hierarchy is that Ruben Amorim was not interested in mitigating circumstances. It was basically back me or sack me. And given those two choices, it was always only going to end one way, because Omar Barada, Christopher Vivell's input, and ultimately Sir Jim Ratcliffe and the Glazers, when forced to choose between the perspective of Wilcox or Amorim, they were always going to side with Wilcox. And as that relationship deteriorated before Leeds and after it, Ruben Amorim was suddenly on really thin ice, as we broke last night and as was confirmed this morning.
Now, I want to really ask about the next, I guess, permanent manager that could be coming into the club. When would you say that, obviously from people you know, would you say is the most likely time that the new manager will come in? Would it be at the end of the season? Would it be at the start of pre-season, or would it be the start of next season? Or could it even be before the season finishes?
Yeah, it's fluid at the moment because we've got an interim. We might have an interim to the interim, and then we may have a permanent manager. So the plan as of now, but I do stress that it could change very quickly, is to try and find a permanent new head coach for summer. And then they have to decide how long Darren Fletcher can be interim and they support him versus having him take charge in the short term, finding another caretaker, then making a permanent appointment. And I think Manchester United have learned one lesson, regardless of the fact that certain names are available now and others might be prepared to come. Because if we go back to the Amorim appointment, Ruben Amorim said to Manchester United when at Sporting, I do not want this job mid-season. I want to come in the summer. That's the most stable time. And that's when we'll start working together. And Omar Barada, in leading that process, coupled to an extent with the Glazers and Jim Ratcliffe, said to Amorim directly, you got to take it now because we're Man United. Otherwise, we'll go and find someone else. Now, I think the hierarchy's perspective has changed. And even though they know they can go to a variety of names and say, we're Man United, take it or leave it, the preference seems to be to start with a new manager in a new season with a full off season and likely a fair amount of money to spend plus a midfield revamp. And it's actually Manchester United at the moment anyway that are the ones delaying because they're more inclined to start afresh with a full off season, knowing that when they tried it the other way around with Ruben Amorim, it didn't work. But let's see whether that perspective changes, because if they decide on a preferred candidate and they are just available, then it could make sense to still try and get them in mid-season. But right now, plan A is Darren Fletcher, who doesn't have a 1 or even 2 game remit at the moment. He's just the interim. But some sources within Man United have said within the last kind of hour or two that maybe he will only do a game or two. Then there'll be a caretaker until the end of the season. Then there'll be a permanent manager. And obviously, Michael Carric is one name that has been mentioned in the past, and he might come into conversations in the coming hours or coming days if they go down that route. Then, as far as the permanent successor is concerned, a lot of the names we've mentioned before on this show, Oliver Glasner is one of them. I've said many times, Glasner, very interested in the Manchester United vacancy if they make an approach. Still could be the case that he sees out a season at Crystal Palace. But my expectation is that Oliver Glasner's not signing a new Crystal Palace deal. And that may even be the case, even if they somehow, in a fairy tale way, get Champions League football. So Glasner's going to become a free agent in the summer. And his ideal preference is to do a full season with Crystal Palace and then assess his options. So let's kind of see whether that develops. But he's naturally one name that we should keep an eye on. The likes of Marco Silva and Andoni Iraola also have question marks over their future. Silva's not signed a new deal. Andoni Iraola and Bournemouth are speaking about a new contract. And Iraola has also got a release clause, I believe, in the region of £15 million. So Premier League experience is available. Xavi keeps being linked. I'm told it's more from the Xavi side, making it clear to people around Manchester United he would love that job, but we don't yet know whether it's reciprocal. Enzo Maresca is a very interesting name. No approach to him yet, but of course they had to decide what they were doing with Amorim. So I'd be surprised if the club have done anything other than succession planning. I think as far as formally approaching candidates, that's all for the coming days. But what I can tell you about Maresca, who's also, of course, linked with Man City, is before Ruben Amorim was appointed, Chelsea moved fast to try and get Enzo Maresca from Leicester because they felt that Manchester United might move. So he could become a candidate as well. And then the likes of Thomas Frank, Maurizio Pochettino were both candidates last time. Frank is not going to be a contender this time around and is at Spurs anyway. So as I'm told, he can be ruled out entirely, which is no real surprise. given that he's just gone to Spurs and they haven't made a positive start to the season. Mauricio Pochettino would be interested in the role, but is not going to go anywhere until after the 2026 World Cup. And Kieran McKenna was another name that Manchester United thought long and hard about bringing back to Old Trafford. So there'll be quite a long shortlist in many ways at the moment, because I don't think Manchester United a month ago were necessarily wanting to make a mid-season change, but the situation has unraveled really quickly. So as it stands, I would say some are more likely than mid-season for a permanent Manchester United manager, and keep an eye on some of the names that I've mentioned. Oliver Glasner being keen on the role, Iriola and Silva both having question marks over their future, Maresca being a free agent. Plenty of reports, including from myself, on Gareth Southgate as well. What I would say there is that, yes, he is appreciated, and yes, Sir Jim Ratcliffe has spoken to him, but we don't yet know whether Southgate even wants to take another managerial role. So that is not in any way lined up or advanced, but don't be surprised if you also see Southgate's name thrown into the mix over the course of the coming days or weeks.
Well, I've got another question. I really want to know, I don't know if you have the exact figures, but how much is this sacking going to be worth to Manchester United?
We don't know that yet, only because, as far as I'm aware, as of right now when we're live, they've sacked him. But as was the case with Enzo Maresca as well, they're still formulating the severance or compensation package. And that will be a bit more complicated, because Ruben Amorim said publicly, if Man United want to get rid of him, he'll walk away without any compensation. And as a consequence, there may be an ability for Manchester United to part ways with Ruben Amorim in a more cost-effective way. But if he is entitled to the compensation, and given the manner of his exit, he's changed his mind, then yeah, Manchester United will have to pay something out. And at the moment, I wouldn't put a specific number on it, because as far as I'm aware, they've sacked him, but the severance part is still currently being negotiated.
Wow. Okay. So, I mean, look, guys in the chat, everyone, there's so many people watching right now. Just under 7,000 people. Send in any super chats. There's so many comments coming in the chat. Send in your super chats, and we're going to bring them all in to the show. And you're going to be able to ask Ben any questions you want to know. So send in all of your super chats so I can bring them in. But I think that's really interesting, though. I completely forgot that Amorim said that he said, you know what, I'll walk away with any compensation. But I'm assuming, you know, you get sacked, you're going to want to walk away with something, just to at least, just for your time, you know, the amount of time it might take for him. He might not get another job till next season, you know, so you might want to obviously get paid for that. But I think it's really interesting to see, I really want to know the figures as to what Amorim could potentially get paid out for the rest of his 2-year contract.
I mean, we know the figures, but again, they would be subject to some kind of negotiation. So Manchester United, first of all, had to pay compensation to Sporting Lisbon. Let's not forget that.
Yeah.
And we know from previous figures out there that that was £9.5 million. Then you have Ruben Amorim's current Manchester United contract, which was worth somewhere in the region of just shy of 7 million. So now, in theory, Manchester United, under the terms, would have to pay Amorim the rest of his contract after sacking him. And that potentially could be as high as just over 10 million on top of the almost 8 million that he's already earned since he's been at the club. So if you add those three figures up, compensation to Sporting, what's left on Ruben Amorim's contract and what they've already paid him, that is over 25 million pounds. It's almost 30 million, in fact. But I come back to what I said before, that Ruben Amorim said publicly he either wouldn't take any severance or that he would walk away and make it more cost effective to Manchester United. So the compensation itself, because of the terms of the deal, is clear that he's owed the rest of his contract. So that would be somewhere in the region of 10 million pounds. But Amorim may be flexible or may be willing to take a little bit less if he's true to his word, albeit he said those comments quite a while ago and under slightly different circumstances. So worst case scenario, ballpark, 10 million compensation, plus what they paid him in the contract, plus what they paid Sporting to get him. So somewhere between 25 and 30 million pounds all in, if those three figures are factored in. But let's see whether Ruben Amorim is asked by Manchester United to stick to what he said publicly, and that might make them at least some form of saving. The other thing that people don't always realise is after you determine a compensation number, it can be flexible as to how you pay it. So, for example, you could say to Ruben Amorim, we're going to pay you out your contract, but we're going to do that in installments over the entire contract length. So effectively, you keep getting a monthly salary up until the point where your contract expires. And then if in that period, somebody makes an approach for Ruben Amorim, Manchester United, because he's still contracted to them, can ask for their own compensation. Or alternatively, if he gets a job within 1 month, then the rest of the compensation can be waived. And I think that sort of middle ground is very likely, where on paper it may appear the full compensation, but Amorim might, in theory, agree to, should he get another job, being allowed to take it and then waiving whatever compensation is owed at the time he gets his new job. So it's not just a case of writing him one massive check and then him walking away and severing ties. There's legal ways of doing it that mean you can stagger the payments all the way through, by the way, to a period when PSR won't exist. And there's potentially fail safes from Manchester United's perspective. So if Ruben Amorim suddenly ends up in work, they might be able to offset what they have paid or what they have to pay by the fact that somebody might owe them a number to get him out of his existing Manchester United deal, even though he has been sacked.
Okay, so just to clarify, people might not have heard, so it could be looking at 25 to 30 billion at how much Man United have ended up spending altogether for Ruben Amorim, including
what I would
the
say
severance that they paid to Sporting.
Yeah, although what I'd say on that is that you bring in the manager in good faith. So is it fair when billing a number to add the compensation that they paid or the salary up to this point? So if you're only looking at the compensation, give or take 10 million. If you're only looking at what he's earned so far, give or take 8 million plus the 9.5 million that they paid to Sporting to actually get him and his backroom staff out. So yeah, those three numbers add up roughly to between 25 and 30 million. But the compensation based on what's left on his contract as of today to sack him is a number closer to 10 million. And
could that also include, I guess, if they do go and bring somebody in halfway through the season, that could be another cost to go and pay them? For example, if obviously Darren Fletcher's in right now, let's say they go and bring in another manager to take him to the end of the season, or let's say they go and bring in, you threw out some names out there like Glasner to come to the end of the season, they'll have to go and pay another package on top of that to take him to the end of the season. So that's even more money that's going to be onto the books, I guess, for this whole decision.
If they went mid-season, in theory, yes. But I come back to what I said before, that if you run through the candidates and you think summer, Enzo Maresca and Xavi already free agents, so is Gareth Southgate, if they went down that route. And I want to stress it is an if, because I think there's maybe more concrete targets at this stage. Then Oliver Glasner, free agent in the summer, no cost affiliated there. Andoni Iraola, Marco Silva, contracts winding down as well. So Manchester United will have cost-effective options. And once again, I reiterate, if the manner of any severance to Ruben Amorim keeps him on the Manchester United books as they pay it, then they may still be entitled to compensation should Amorim get another job between now and when his Manchester United contract was due to expire. So there are ways of offsetting the outlay, but as with Erik ten Hag, it is costly. And that's the sort of flip side. You can put a positive spin on it, but if you think more negatively financially, the money that they've spent on extending Ten Hag, then firing him, on adding Ruben Amorim and then firing him, all in the space of a very short space of time, it's probably collectively the same number that they've allocated to sign Antoine Semenyo or make a bid for an Elliot Anderson. So it's certainly not the best look on the project because they've not been strategically aligned. But I think when it becomes untenable between a manager and a sporting department or a leadership team, you have to cut ties, because if they didn't and just dragged it out with Amorim until the summer, with Amorim realising it was the beginning of the end since late last year, then that maybe has more chance of derailing Manchester United's season. And let's not forget that one silver lining, that they really aren't far off at the moment at the halfway stage, qualifying for one of those 5 Champions League spots.
100%. Now, look, there's a bunch of super chats coming in. Like I said, make sure you send them in. I'm going to go through some of them and I'm going to get some more questions in a second. First super chat is from Camilla, says, is it Darren Fletcher, the commentator? No. No, it's not. It's
the under-18s coach.
Yeah, the under-18s coach, former Man United player, the father to Jack and Tyler Fletcher. That's the Darren Fletcher that we're talking about.
Love that someone spent money on that question, though.
Yeah, yeah, literally. Super chat from Simply Game says, they pushed Amorim out of Sporting only to push him out of Manchester United. I mean, fair point. They dragged him out. He said he didn't want to come. He came, and now they're pushing him out of United. I guess, yeah. And I can understand why Amorim would be really frustrated with what's going on. But I guess back to the owners. That's their decisions that they're making. Not the best decisions in my opinion, but that's the owners that we've got. Another super chat from Darren Mullen. He says, who will be the manager till they find a new one in the summer? I think he threw out a bunch of names before already.
Yeah, at the moment, Manchester United sources are not definitively saying that there'll be Darren Fletcher plus caretaker, then permanent manager. It's an open situation. So that is one scenario. And obviously you've got somebody like Michael Carric, although as of this morning, he wasn't approached. But I think things will move very quickly now. So I think plan 1 is just Darren Fletcher, permanent manager. Plan 2 is Darren Fletcher, caretaker, then permanent manager. And plan 3 is if they find the right name to appoint permanently mid-season, they might do something earlier than the summer. Plan 2 seems the most likely as of now, but I sense that they're still having meetings to decide what they want to do. So I wouldn't necessarily say there's a definitive singular approach yet. The timeline for either another caretaker or a permanent manager is still to be determined, and perhaps we'll get some clarity on that in the next 24 to 72 hours.
So another question that's in from, G. Rango says, no sack, no NDA. Ineos did not want him to talk. So a super chat from Irfan says, with the club being petty and saying head coach multiple times, why would any decent manager want this role? I mean, I do have a question based on that. When it comes to the role of obviously Ruben Amorim and what they would have said to him at the start of, well, before obviously he came in and the conversations they had whilst, they spoke to him before Ten Hag even got fired. What would be the clarifications that he would have had? Would they have said to him, look, your role at this club is to manage the team, manage the football and tactical side of it, and we will be in charge of transfers, etc. Is that something that they tell or they would have told Ruben Amorim, or would it have been more of a surprise for him? Would they have said to him, no, look, you have complete control over this club going forward?
No, Ruben Amorim was hired as the head coach, so he can say publicly, and we have to respect that. Press conference, he's the manager and he's going to manage the team, but his title is head coach. And that was a specific departure on previous Manchester United managers. And it's very much a Ratcliffe and Ineos thing, supported by the likes of Omar Barada and now Jason Wilcox and Christopher Vivell. So every coach coming into Manchester United under Ineos is expected to be a head coach, not a manager. And the point of departure from managers that had full control and autonomy and input over recruitment came after Eric Ten Hag. They did 2 things, if you remember. After the FA Cup final win, they held the review and they decided to keep, but not offer Eric Ten Hag a new contract, simply extend the 1 year that he had in his existing deal as they assessed whether that would work. And because of that, the upside to Manchester United was that Ten Hag didn't suddenly have 5 years, and if it all unraveled quickly, you pay an even higher number of compensation. But the advantage to Ten Hag was he kept his veto. And Eric Ten Hag had a specific veto where he could block any transfers. Ruben Amorim then came in as head coach, and he knew from day one there would be no veto. And he was aware of his job title, and he took the job. So if he felt he was head coach by name, but by nature, he had the powers of Ten Hag as a, in inverted commas, manager, then he didn't do his due diligence, because as far as I'm aware, the Manchester United hierarchy were entirely transparent that you are a football coach, you have input into recruitment, but you don't have any kind of autonomy, and decisions will be made collaboratively. And I expect that to continue going forwards. I think Amorim's issue is that if, as a head coach, you don't have that veto in recruitment or that autonomy, that's fine. But then if you flip it, should your leadership team have a veto or autonomy in football decisions, such as formation or tactics? And this is kind of a grey area, because if you're the guys owning the football club and running the model, you could argue that you can do what you want in any department. But I think head coaches that are prepared to surrender a bit of power in recruitment still want full autonomy over lineups and selection. And over time, I think Amorim's perspective from speaking to those close to him is that Manchester United's leadership team were leaning upon him to be more tactically flexible. They were delaying a Kobbie Mainoo exit because maybe the player outlasts the manager, which has proven to be the case. And therefore, as head coach, you start to wonder if you've got the autonomy in the football department. And that was a point of contention from Amorim's point of view. Man United tell a slightly different story, that he knew what he was getting in for, that he had a very clearly defined title, that they departed from Erik ten Hag's veto, that they never told him who to pick, that they backed him over not selecting Kobbie Mainoo, that they were fully supportive over the departure of Alejandro Garnacho, that he asked for 2 number 10s and he got them, that he wanted a number 9 and he got them, that they tried to sign Antoine Semenyo and they're not going to panic buy, and the midfield revamp is predominantly going to take place over the summer. So Manchester United feel like at the end of this all, it came down to no progress, no evolution after that 38 collective Premier League games over 2 seasons passed. And the only real contradiction to that is the public interview by Jim Ratcliffe saying that Ruben Amorim was going to get 3 years. But as I've said before, in hindsight, that just looks like grandstanding. And I think it's riskier as a massive club like Man United to just say by default, it's 3 years, and to let the project go to rot. No manager at any big club, if they have collectively 38 inconsistent games with no real progress on the field, no manager's going to be safe. And ultimately, that is why Ruben Amorim has departed. So we can bill it as tension. We can look at breakdown in relationships. We can speak about that head coach title. You can look at Amorim and also Ratcliffe's public comments. But both of them were kind of said for a reason at a very specific point in time. But if you strip all of that away and you just look at Ruben Amorim's Premier League games, which collectively over 2 seasons extend to beyond 38 games, he just didn't get enough points. He didn't keep enough clean sheets. He didn't win enough games. And I think Manchester United would argue that if you add the tension to that inconsistent form, they had no choice but to make a mid-season change.
I mean, it sounds like a whole lot of miscommunication between the manager and the owners. I mean, look, obviously, like you mentioned, Ruben Amorim was very inconsistent with his results. But I don't understand how after over a year, there's still confusion as to whether he's the manager or the head coach. Shouldn't this have been, I'm not saying this to you, but in general, shouldn't this have been a conversation that they would have been having pretty regularly as to what Ruben Amorim's role is at the club? I mean, for him to come out, I mean, he came in the job in November, we're in January now, and he still believed up until this point that he was a manager, not just a head coach. I feel like as an ownership, surely that should have been something that you're telling the manager constantly, this is what the plan is, this is what we're going to do. I just don't see how that gets lost in communication.
Well, I don't think it was lost in communication. Again, it's really easy to hear what Amorim said publicly and hear what Ratcliffe said publicly, but are they telling the full truth or are they making a point? And I think Amorim was making a point, knowing it was the beginning of the end. He wanted it out there that his perspective is he's not been backed in the market and there's been interference in his domain, the football department. That was why he said the comments, to my understanding. And Ratcliffe backed his manager because there was a lot of speculation about him going. So Manchester United at that point wanted it out there. We're trying to judge Ruben Amorim in years, not months, weeks, or games. And that also proved to be incorrect. So it's kind of one of the most frustrating things as a journalist, even though we know it's the profession, because we get information and we'll never reveal a source because you have to protect your sources at all costs. And if the information changes, or even if the information is correct, we're never going to be able to say, this is what we always understood consistently, privately from this person. Then somebody comes out in public, like a manager speaking about a player or an owner speaking about a manager, and they say something that appears black and white, and it's often just swallowed. And then sometimes if it contradicts your reporting, you can get a little bit attacked. But just because they've said something publicly, it doesn't mean it doesn't need scrutiny, and it doesn't mean that it should be swallowed. Because several times owners, directors, managers, players say one thing one day and it proves to be the opposite. So once again, Amorim said what he said to make a point, knowing he was on the way out. But I actually think it was clear and consistent throughout his tenure what the role was and what the remit was. Over time, he just didn't like it. And similarly, Sir Jim Ratcliffe said 3 years, but did he ever honestly believe it was going to be 3 years if results didn't improve? I'm not so sure, because I don't think anybody can guarantee any Manchester United manager 3 years under any circumstances if results don't improve. So I've said many times in my reporting, and I maintain the position, 38 Premier League games collectively over 2 seasons, then enough data to judge Amorim, plus, as importantly, this season, a desire to either get through the festive and New Year fixtures on the same page, on and off the field, then Amorim would have got until at least summer. Or if they couldn't get on the same page, on and off the field, he was always going to go. And that's exactly what happened.
Okay, so, I mean, look, there's some more super chats in here. I'm going to read some of them out. Super chat from Red Devil says, can't wait to see Manu again. Bruno will get sold for as much as we can get in the summer. Woke up in the late as soon as I saw the notification. Cheers. Super chat from Mazraoui, great super chat. I'm not going to read it out though. Super chat from Ben says, would you take Klopp? Probably not.
I also don't think Klopp would take this job or any club management job at the moment. The only other name we've not mentioned is Roberto De Zerbi, and Chelsea have had appreciation for him as well, even though they're about to appoint Liam Rosenior. He will come back to the Premier League one day, I'm told. So there's plenty of options out there. But the beauty for Manchester United, especially if they are going to be patient and wait until summer, is just the fact that a lot of these names were available anyway, or are now available anyway. So everybody knew that Glasner, Silva, Iriola were going to be summer options, whether Manchester United want them or not. And then if you add Maresca, because he left Chelsea, you got 4 with proven Premier League experience that are all cost effective and are all available. So this isn't now a managerial situation like perhaps in some previous summers for various clubs where there's just not the right names available. They'll have no excuse if they wait until summer to find the right name, because there's plenty of options.
Okay, cool. And some more super chats in here. So super chat from Ben Michaela says, any chances Ollie comes back as interim, obviously?
I don't think so. Although, again, if they go down the route of replacing Darren Fletcher with somebody short term, they will be looking at names that have got an affinity with the football club. I'm not aware yet of a short list. Like I said before, the only thing I can report at this stage is that if Darren Fletcher doesn't stay for the long run, it's not outside the realms of possibility that a caretaker comes in before a permanent manager. Michael Carric, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, all names with an affinity with the football club, but we're waiting to see if that's their plan, and we're waiting to see if they're going to approach those kind of names. So it's not a case of not knowing yet at our end. It's a case of Man United, as we're live, still holding these meetings, because perhaps 2 weeks ago, they were not planning for this eventuality. So they're now having to scramble and put a plan together. So hopefully we'll have more clarity in the next 24, 48 hours. But it's just one of those stories where we're reacting to something whilst simultaneously Man United are still reacting to something. And when the dust settles in the next day or two, I'll hopefully be able to come back with more concrete names.
100%. So I'm going to keep going through these super chats. Another one said, I mean, you pretty much answered it already, but from super chat from Christy says, Zidane, question mark?
Well, Zidane's been linked before. I don't think they'll go down that route. I'm hearing mostly that they're going full circle to something Dan Ashworth had said before he left the club, which is hire somebody with Premier League experience. So that's why Xavi and Zidane may prove to be a bit further back in their thinking. The caveat is, of course, Ineos are aware of both of them and have a relationship with each. But right now, I'm hearing quite a lot of noise around Glasner. And you may remember on previous shows, I'd mentioned Glasner. And the other debate that they're going to have is whether they're going to hire somebody to a different system or whether actually they're going to back how Amorim was playing. And if they want continuity with Amorim, Glasner's a great appointment. If they're going to stipulate it's a back four or it's a different style of football, then other names come into the mix. So when we were talking last season and even at the beginning of this season about a change, it was very much framed around who can you find that's actually going to get the best out of who they've already recruited, the best out of who they plan to recruit, and not have a massive stylistic change from Amorim ball. Because then, like when Klopp left Liverpool and Arne Slot came in, you're not that worried about that first few weeks or months with mass change. Whereas if you look at Nottingham Forest, when they brought in Ange Postecoglou, the football was so different to Nuno that how was he ever supposed to get the best out of that group of players? So it was a great profile and it was a nice idealistic signing, but the tools Postecoglou wanted didn't marry with what that playing group were used to doing. And that's why I think Postecoglou struggled. And that's why the players didn't like it. And that's why it didn't work. So that's where Manchester United have now got a big decision. Do they hire somebody that can build upon what Ruben Amorim has done? And Glasner would be high in their thinking if they go down that route, or do they go for something completely different? And this is possibly also why, along with not wanting to make a rash and quick appointment, it's maybe another reason why they're taking their time, because they realize in summer they can do a lot of due diligence and they can wait for the right candidate rather than rush an appointment.
Yes, a great information there. So another super chat from Golden Boy Wazza says, Ruben Amorim, sorry, let me just get this up quickly. Ruben Amorim was never sacked for results. If it was for results, this decision would have been made months ago. Pure mafia and dictatorship from the board. Another super chat from Pizza GC says, Red Devils, this is a rally call, get the Glazers out. Super chat from Anno says, Ruben had a bad win percentage, but the board has done a bad decision right now, sacking him. Should have given him time. Our board is acting clueless. Gutted. Another super chat from Akash says, hi, any news on club sale / Saudi interest to buy?
No, I don't think there's going to be any sort of imminent takeover. The drag out clause, in theory, means that the Glazers could sell. And we know that there was a UAE consortium that I broke, and they're still determining if they're going to put themselves together. And Eric Cantona is involved in that. But Saudi were not involved in that. So when Turki Al-Sheikh spoke about potential investment in Manchester United, he was doing that because he was aware of the potential investors involved. He was not directly behind it, nor was any Saudi entity. And I believe that Turki Al-Sheikh confirmed that on the record as well. So if there is to be investment in Manchester United, the drag-out clause allows the Glazers to drag Ratcliffe out at the right price. But I think what people don't realize about that clause is it's still much lower per share, $33 a share, than the Glazers want to sell for. Because $33 a share comes to under 5 billion. And with the new stadium plans in force and Man United on course for some kind of European football, the Glazers' valuation hasn't changed. It's going up by the season. It's going up as the brand develops. It's going up as the stadium project goes from on paper to a reality and construction starts. So somebody that wants to drag out Ratcliffe and buy 100% of the club, in my opinion, can't trigger the clause, because the Glazers have the ability with that number to still reject it. It doesn't allow a buyer to just match $33 a share and force everyone out. It allows the Glazers to say, are we going to sell? And if they agree, Ratcliffe has to follow or potentially match it, but they would likely disagree at that number because the drag out clause is actually too low for them, which gives Sir Jim Ratcliffe a safeguard. So I'm not anticipating anything imminent as far as a new owner of Manchester United, and I fully expect Ineos to drive the process to find a replacement for Ruben Amorim.
Okay, another super chat in here. Going to get through these really quickly. Let me just get it up. A few of them are coming through. From Airfan says, with Ruben's agent the same as Bruno, do you see a knock-on effect and see him leaving?
No, I don't think so. It's probably worth noting that as one, the merged super agency have got several hundred clients, because the manner in which they founded was kind of cherry picking some of the top agencies all around the world. And it'd be like saying Jorge Mendes has Enzo Maresca and he leaves Chelsea. So that means that Chelsea will not look at any Mendes business because there's bad blood, or other Mendes clients will somehow be put off Chelsea. Quite the opposite. It's very likely that all of these big agencies continue to do business. And sometimes when a client leaves from one big agency, they offer you up several solutions as well, and that can help protect relationships. So I don't think there's any worry over Bruno Fernandes's future being tied to Ruben Amorim. Maybe the opposite, because you could argue that Bruno Fernandes has been playing in a deeper midfield role under this Amorim system, perhaps under the interim or the caretaker or the new manager. He goes back into a more advanced role and he prefers it. I'm told, again, as I've said several times, that Bruno Fernandes will decide his future in the summer. It will be informed by where the Manchester United project is. It will be informed by whether they do or don't have likely Champions League football. And it will be informed by whether Manchester United tell him they want to cash in to help fund their midfield revamp, because there's that roughly 65 million euros release clause that somebody could trigger. And although we've heard several times that Bruno Fernandes wants to stay either at Manchester United or in Europe, I'm still told Saudi deal makers haven't given up for the summer, and they will go back to Bruno Fernandes and see whether after the World Cup he is prepared to join. And I'm still told that Bruno Fernandes was actually quite willing to go to Al Hilal and some of the other clubs like Al Ittihad and Al Nassr that made him offers. He simply said, I like the project, but the timing's wrong. And as importantly, he spoke to his family and they weren't entirely sold on leaving Manchester United or leaving Europe. So Bruno Fernandes has got big decisions to make, and they'll come in the summer, but I don't think it's remotely tied to the departure of Ruben Amorim, even though, as you say, Amorim and Fernandes share the same agency, but it's a massive agency and they've got hundreds and hundreds of clients.
Yeah. Super chat from Red Devil says, any chance United get another number 9?
Possibly. I think out of opportunism, maybe they would look for somebody, if they're economical, mid-season, maybe a loan or a nominal fee. But I think the priority is summer midfield revamp. If anyone in midfield is available before that, they'll move, as they showed with Semenya. There is money there, but they don't want to waste that money at the expense of summer business. Right now, you've got Benjamin Sesko and also Mateus Cunha capable of playing as 9s, and Chido Obi's pathway is not something that they want to stifle. So I've said many times, a more experienced squad number 9 could be a possibility. But if they are to spend money in January, and it is an if, then I sense that it will have to be a market opportunity that they see as long-term, somebody that they were going to go for anyway in the summer, or somebody, if it's Yan Diomande, for example, that they're forced to enter the conversation for in January because other clubs move, and then they risk either not being in the conversation or having to go earlier and spend money in order to get a signing over the line. But if it's quiet January, it just tells you that many of Man United's targets, maybe Diomande, who could be more a summer saga, definitely the likes of Carlos Baleba and Elliot Anderson, they're just not available in January. And Manchester United, if they are to move and they don't see another club decide to put in a bid for these type of targets, there's no reason for them to pay a premium in January by bidding against themselves to force through business if they can await and then make it more economical come summer. But if another club suddenly puts down 80 odd million for Elliot Anderson, and somehow miraculously, even though it's not going to happen, Forest decide they want to engage and Elliot Anderson decides he wants to leave mid-season, then they absolutely have to enter that race earlier than anticipated. But that will only be a scenario, as with Antoine Semenyo, where another club moves first. And it was clear to Manchester United in that saga that if they didn't do anything, Man City were going to get the deal done. So they had to push forwards aggressively to see whether they could get Semenyo's green light. But if City hadn't moved, and with Liverpool not moving, then maybe Man United would have just waited on Semenyo until the summer. And I think they'd have hoped that that happened, because they will have known come summer that they might have Champions League football. They might have been in a stronger position to attract him to the project. So there's sort of two kinds of January plans, is what I'm saying. Plan number one is where someone they always wanted in the summer is available at good value, and then they'll move. If not, it will be a quiet January. And plan two is where someone they don't really want to bid for now is bid for by another club, and then their hand is forced. And under that scenario, as Semenyo showed, there is budget available. It's just not really money Manchester United ideally want to spend now. And that was one of the things that Ruben Amorim was disappointed by.
Okay, and some more super chats in, a couple more before we close up the show. Super chat from Daniel Thompson says, hope you well, Mod and Ben plus TOS. Your jumper Mod sums up Man United right now. Drama, pure chaos. Who do you want and think will be next? Sack the board, Glinius out. So who do you
I
want?
think that was to you, wasn't it? Who do you want next?
Honestly, to say who I want next is tough. I'm going to have to look at... I think some of the names that you've thrown out, you threw out Glasner, you threw out Xavi, you threw out Iraola. I can't put down one name, but I think, yeah, the only person I say I wouldn't want is I wouldn't want to go and get Maresca from Chelsea. Well, obviously he's not at Chelsea no more, but I don't think going and getting a manager who was sacked from a board who didn't think he was good enough will be good for Manchester United in general. But I do want to get a manager who has at least proven, even a little bit, that he has some kind of, whether it's Prem proven or whether he's won a European trophy or something, some kind of proven manager to come into the club. I don't think I'd want to go for another manager who has probably no experience to come to the club.
Let me ask you this as well. It's left field, I know, but if it was a caretaker between now and the end of the season, would you take Wayne Rooney?
Wayne Rooney. I mean, the thing is, realistically, it's probably going to be an ex-player anyway, whether it's Carric or Fletcher or Rooney or Rude. I'm seeing Rude's name around. I'm seeing Van Persie's name get thrown around. Look, I'd be lying if I said I knew how good Rooney was as a manager. I know he's been sacked a couple of times. So, you know, he's obviously not done a crazy job at some clubs. So yeah, I wouldn't say I'm confident in getting Rooney into the end of the season. But at the same time, I'm also not that confident in what Darren Fletcher can do. We kind of just have to wait and see what these managers do in this short period. Well, I guess I say short period of time. It's half the season pretty much that they've got. So whoever it is, you're gonna have a lengthy amount of time to actually almost kind of prove yourself and audition for maybe not just the United job, but for another job somewhere else. You know, let's say Carrick does come in. Yes, he might not end up with the Manchester United job, but another club might look at him and say, you know what, I like what you did there. Do you want to come and take this job here?
Yeah, and it's not as long as you think, because with respect to the FA Cup, Manchester United won't have that as a priority, especially because they're on track for European football of some capacity through the league. And then because there's no European football in the second half of the season or all of this season, it's 18 Premier League games effectively to try and get into that top 4 or top 5 if the coefficients provide an extra space. And 2 of those games are likely to be Darren Fletcher. So any interim coming in, if it isn't Fletcher until the end of the season, would probably only have 16 Premier League games. And as Chelsea showed with Callum McFarlane against Manchester City, players kind of go into autopilot. Players actually become more motivated when they know that they're proving a point in a period of limbo with a new permanent manager to come in. So at big clubs, the disadvantage sometimes can be all the egos and factions, and you need a manager that can get everyone on side. But the advantage can be the same egos can go into autopilot. And Chelsea got a great point at Man City doing that. And Man United have got plenty of leaders that can help them almost salvage the season from a player-led position, regardless of who the interim is. And this is why I think interims generally do okay. I mean, I know Ralph Rangnick ended up saying the whole club needed open heart surgery, but the short-term interims, Ruud van Nistelrooy, for example, they tend to do okay. And I think the reason for that is, again, because players go into autopilot, players respect someone that's played for the club, players know that it's only temporary, so you don't have as much fallout or politics, and players realize that the limelight is back on them, because until that permanent manager comes in, they're having to prove themselves, knowing that it might be all changed during the summer. So this might be the kick up the backside that Manchester United need to really kick on in the second half of the season, regardless of the fact there'll be instability because we don't know who the next permanent manager is and we don't yet know how long Darren Fletcher's going to stay. But if the leaders in the group, the likes of Bruno Fernandes, Cunha's a great leader, Harry Maguire will have a role to play even if he's not starting every week, Casemiro as well. I think if they really unite in this short term, then Manchester United have still got plenty to play for this season.
100%. I think the season can definitely end up with a European spot. I think considering how, we are in sixth right now, and considering how we end up like finishing the season, we could definitely, if that, like I said, that momentum does grow into the second half of the season, we could potentially, like I said, finish in a decent spot to end the season. So look, some more super chats in quickly. Michael says it's just a dictatorship. You can't say anything. Super chat from 9. Pregash says, hi, question for Ben. Do you know if the ownership at United are aware of how much blame the fans lay at their door, or are they blissfully aware, thinking we all blame Ruben?
No, I think that the protests against the Glazers are obviously long-standing, and now there's a lot more scrutiny on the Ineos side of the business because they're running the sporting model, and it isn't a great look. You can't hide it. We try and be balanced in our journalism, but in presenting the facts are that they came in, they said they were keeping Erik ten Hag, they U-turned on that, they brought in Dan Ashworth, he left, they brought in Ruben Amorim mid-season when he wanted to join during the summer. Now they've got rid of Ruben Amorim. The recruitment has been scattergun. They haven't addressed the midfield, which is screaming for another player. Although, like I say, in fairness, a lot of the targets are only really going to be available this summer. They had one manager with a veto as a manager, another manager who is a head coach and obviously wanted more power. They perhaps should have done more due diligence on Amorim to realise from his time at Sporting that he is quite prickly and forthright with ownership groups, and he does want quite a lot of autonomy. And many at Sporting said that wouldn't change regardless of his job title on day one. I've told the story before of how the board at Sporting re-signed Islam Slimani, legend of the club. Day one he arrived, Amorim didn't like him, demoted him within a matter of weeks to the under-23s, and basically said to his board, if you want to play him, I'm not your manager, or I'm your manager and I don't play him. And that's his approach to a lot of things. He's got a maverick streak. He wears his heart on his sleeve. He's brutally honest. So it isn't a good look, because what they've done is they've built a model that requires an element of patience, and they've got a lot of individuals that are excellent hires, like Omar Barada, Christopher Vivell's got a great eye for talent, Jason Wilcox has stepped up since Dan Ashworth left. But collectively, and we're not talking about on the field now, we're talking about the leadership team, they've perhaps not yet found their own chemistry. So everybody's sort of talking about Amorim's system and the players on the field, but as a leadership team, the more voices you add, the more the chemistry, the debate, the freedom to challenge, the hierarchy, the more that has to find a functional way. Because in your decision making, you've simply got more voices and more politics. And the hope is over time that the model gets consistent and the manager is not the person that drives success or failure. It's your leadership team and it's your strategy. And the success of the football club can survive a change in manager or a signing that doesn't work. But at the moment, they're making decisions really quickly. And you could certainly make an argument that they're running before they walk and they're trying to be ambitious. But by moving so fast, they look indecisive. And some of the hires and some of the signings that they've made obviously haven't worked. All that said, if within this turmoil, they somehow in the second half of the season get back in the Champions League and then hire a manager with proven Premier League experience, there'll once again be a lot of excitement from the Manchester United fan base. So it's fascinating because some projects, when you get to this point, you start to question the model, or you start to think your season's a write-off. But the model's not a write-off and the season's not a write-off. So it looks very unstable, and scrutiny will definitely go from just football department to some of the leadership team, from Manchester United fans at least that I speak to. But once again, they're only a win from being in a Champions League spot, and they're only a midfield revamp and a decent new manager away from being a relatively serious force to contend with from 2026, 2027. So I think some will naturally throw the leadership team under the bus if you're fans. That's not for me to do. I try and take a more balanced approach. But I do think that there's pressure now on that hierarchy to go big in the summer and back their new manager in the market. And if they do that off a season where they have qualified for the Champions League, then there'll probably be quite a lot of excitement come summer. So I'm personally reserving a bit of judgment because I want to see who they now appoint, because I do think on balance it was the right decision to sack Ruben Amorim, and it probably should have come sooner. And I'm reserving judgment until the summer window is done, because once again, if they stick to their plan, there will be 2 new midfielders that arrive. There will be a left wing back that arrives. There'll be a new manager that arrives. And if all of that is accompanied by Champions League football, the project will definitively be in better shape next summer than it was at the beginning of this season. And the hierarchy can point to that and say that counts as progress. So judging it now, I think, is a little bit risky, even though there's a lot of emotion, because, as I say, let's see if they can get that Champions League football, and then let's see if they live up to their plan as of now in the summer and make another significant spend.
Yes, 100%. Now, look, one more super chat from SMYK says, waking up to see sacking before here we go. It is sad. Yes, I'm not going to lie. We do need a few here we goes this month. But look, thank you guys for watching. Our time has gone. Thank you first of all to Ben Jacobs, actually, for giving us a complete lowdown, a complete scoop on the Ruben Amorim. I'm sure there's probably going to be so much more news coming out today, throughout the day. So make sure you're watching Mark's show later on. He is going to be live at 8 p.m. for the evening show. So make sure you're tuning out for that show. And also Manchester United, the football's still carrying on. Manchester United do have a game on Wednesday. We're playing Burnley, 8 p.m. kickoff. And as you guys know, we have a full day of content. We have a countdown to kickoff, which was actually at 8:15, the game in the evening. We have a countdown to kickoff from 6:15. Mark's watch along will be live at the game, and then we will have the fan forum after the game as well. So make sure you stay in tune for that. But look, there's so much going on today, so make sure you tune into all of the United Stand socials, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, loads of things that are going to be coming out. But thank you guys for watching. Thank you, Ben Jacobs, once again for what you've done for us today, and we'll see you on the next show.